Russians will attack. And at this very moment, we have a pretty precise assumptions where this attack will come from, which is confirmed by multiple sources. But the good news is that as soon as this Russian offensive inevitably collapses and Russians are defeated, this will be the ground for future Ukrainian counter-offensive and potentially even the victory in this war. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's go straight to the point and see some most recent footage. And our first video is pretty controversial, it might be even a fake, but what happens is that the Russian soldier allegedly catches a Ukrainian drone with his bare hands and destroys it. I mean, the way this video is filmed and the interface of drone is pretty suspicious, so just please let me know in the comments whether do you think it's a fake or not. Next we have a pretty interesting map, which shows us the borders of Ukraine in 1919. So as you can see, back in the days, Crimea has always been a part of Ukraine, including some current territories of Russia. Which basically means that all these claims of Russians that no, this is historically our territory, are completely invalid. And speaking about the old times, Russian city Volgograd has temporarily renamed itself to Stalingrad, which was exactly its name during the Second World War. And this was allegedly done as an anniversary for Stalingrad battle. But with the current events happening, the timing looks suspicious. And ultimately, here's a promotional video from the private military company Wagner, which is urging, pay attention here, which is urging Americans to join Wagner. And what the video is basically talking about is that this voice behind the camera, it asks Americans, so you think you are on the good side? Wrong. You are on the side fighting for those people and fulfilling their orders of those power-hungry people. And as a result of this, America has always been invading different countries, destroying civilizations and eliminating civilians. But don't worry, there is still hope in this world, because there is one single country which is fighting against this evil, and this country is Russia. And then, when you thought it couldn't get worse, the video ends with even more ridiculous statement. And it basically says is that if you are a true American patriot, you should join the army of Russia and Wagner Group. I have no idea how they correlate being American patriot and fighting against America, but that's what they say. The full video is almost 2 minutes, and yes, it is in English. And if you want to see the full version of this controversial and pretty ridiculous promotional video, it will be available on my Patreon. The free 1-week promotion is still active, and you can find all useful links down below. But okay, so let's keep going and talk about something serious. So, in this first picture, we can see the very first batch of 60 plus American Bradley's armored personnel carriers being loaded into a cargo ship. And reportedly, this ship has left American territory on January 25th and is scheduled to arrive into the United Kingdom on February 7th. And from there, the Bradleys will be transported into Ukraine. But speaking about some other crucial military vehicles deliveries, unfortunately, recently the Biden administration has mentioned that they will not be sending F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine. According to the representative of the White House, John Kirby, the reason for this is because the US already shows incredible support to Ukraine as it is. And then according to the representative of the Russian Security Council, Alexei Pushkov, the US must use its influence to also not let its allies to send the same F-16 jets to Ukraine. Which basically means that Russia understands that these planes as a major game changer and they're simply afraid of them. But according to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Alexei Reznikov, this no from the US is just temporarily. Because he said that the majority of Western weapons which Ukraine already received, such as world-famous HIMARS, in the very beginning America was also pretty reluctant to send them to Ukraine. But after thorough negotiations and seeing that these weapons will indeed help Ukraine to fight against Russia, this no eventually became a yes. And this, what Alexei Reznikov hopes, is going to happen the same with F-16 planes. But to be honest, we already have one of the earliest signs that other Western countries are ready to consider supplying these fighter jets to Ukraine. Such as, for example, according to the Prime Minister of Netherlands, Mark Rutte, who is saying that his country is ready to revise this option. And then we have the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, who said that nothing is forbidden whenever they're talking about whether France will send their own fighter jets to Ukraine. However, he also mentioned that such deliveries must meet two criteria. The first one is that it should not escalate the situation, and second is that it should not weaken the France itself. In addition to that, France also agreed to send its 12 Caesar howitzers to Ukraine as well. And speaking about the tanks, which at this very moment are crucial military vehicles to Ukraine, according to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the country, Dnipro, the first batch of tanks of 120 to 140 tanks is expected to arrive pretty soon. And among these tanks will be Leopards, Challengers and Abrams. And whenever asked when these tanks deliveries are expected, the advisor to the President of Ukraine, Mikhailo Podolyak, he mentioned that they will be received just on time, most likely assuming that right before the offensive of Russians. And speaking about Russians themselves, they unfortunately also expect some weapon deliveries from another country. And what I'm talking about here are the ballistic missiles from Iran, which unfortunately current Ukrainian air defense system is powerless. And the reason for this, it is because of their almost vertical trajectory and incredibly high speed. That is why, according to the representative of the Ukrainian Air Force, Yuri Ignat, the probable solution here will be to destroy these missiles at their initial location, which basically means ammunition depot of the Russian military bases. And ultimately, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, reportedly more than 800 Russian and Iranian banks have established direct financial communications, which most likely means that they will be used for these payments for the future missiles and drones. But, well, if Ukraine receives all the Western weapons and Russia does a critical mistake of invading too early, Russia might not even receive these missiles in time. And by the time they do, the Ukrainian offensive will most likely be in its final stages. And as always, I will be here to report on these major events, and if you don't want to miss any of them as soon as they start happening, just please consider liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You can also follow me on Instagram and see how I live outside of YouTube. Alright, and before I give you a pretty interesting update from the south, let me give you a very brief update from the east. And first of all, this last night, a Russian air defense system in Belgorod intercepted two aerial targets. Next we go to Ukraine itself, where according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, the major offensive of Ukrainians was to the west of Svatove, and Russians tried to attack to the west of Kreminna, trying to regain their lost positions. Heavy fighting has also been reported next to Krasna Hora and Ivanovske. And speaking about Bakhmut itself, Wagner soldiers for some reason continue their frontal attacks against this settlement, suffering significant losses. And that is why, allegedly, the Russian army started replacing them with just regular conventional Russian soldiers. Going more to the south, as a result of precise Ukrainian artillery attack, a Russian military command base in Kurdyumivka has been destroyed. And then, as a result of yet another successful HIMARS attack by Ukrainians, another Russian military base has been destroyed in Kadiyivka. And as you can see, it is located pretty deep inside Donetsk region. And ultimately, even more heavy fighting has been reported in Marinka. But then, as we take a look at this map, which is also presented to us by the Institute for the Study of War, we can see a pretty huge area to the east of Marinka, which also covers Donetsk city, and this area means that there was a big activity of Ukrainian partisans. And so right now, let's take a look at this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control over the last 24 hours. And first of all, as you can see, Ukrainians were able to deoccupy some part of its land to the northwest of Horlivka. Next we go closer to Bakhmut, and as you can see right here, Russians unfortunately were able to advance closer to Ivanovske. And speaking about Bakhmut itself, this is the way the front line has changed since last day. As we move to Solidar, we can see that Russians unfortunately were also able to expand their invasion to the north of this settlement. And then Kreminna, we can see that Russians were able to capture more land to the south of this settlement. Alright, and before I talk about update from the south, let's briefly discuss one pretty ridiculous and intriguing statement from the Russian government. And it came to us from the representative of the Russian State Duma, Dmitry Gusev, who said that all these Russians, or how he called them, raw dogs, the ones who left the country, they should be returned and given the empty farmlands to work. And I mean, yes, he literally said it, that those million people who left the country should be given some part of this 15 million hectares of Russian empty land, and they should work on it just like in the good old times. And I'm not saying that this gives me like labor camp vibes or some like old Russian style peasantry, but pretty much yes, you are given free land and you're forced to work for the greater good of the motherland. But okay, and now as promised, let's briefly talk about the update from the south. And first of all, according to the Deputy Prime Minister of Russia, yes, for some reason we do have this position, Marat Husnulin, the fourth section of the Crimean Bridge has been successfully installed. Which basically means that for the first time in 4 months since the incident, the Crimean Bridge will be once again fully operational. Next we go to Kherson region, specifically to Dnipro river, where reportedly in the last week alone Ukrainian forces were able to destroy 5 reconnaissance and sabotage boats of Russians. And then moving to Zaporozhye, in the last week Russians did not conduct any official recorded ground attacks, which only once again confirms that the Russian offensive in this direction has completely exhausted itself in less than 1 week, and also the inability of Russian forces to successfully open new front lines as of right now. But it all might change in the next several months. It all started with the statement by the Secretary General of NATO Jens Stoltenberg, who said that he does not see any signs of Russians getting ready for peace talks, but instead they are preparing for the next massive offensive. He said that according to his information, Russia is preparing another round of most likely partial mobilization, which will consist of 200,000 more soldiers. And the directions of next Russian attacks will be basically across the entire front line, including from the north. Which, to be honest, I have to politely disagree, because it already took Russians more than 6 months just to capture one single Solidar. That is why basically I don't believe that they'll be able to successfully open this massive front line. Then we also have the report by the Institute for the Study of War, which claims that the next massive offensive of Putin will be most likely in Luhansk, and probably whatever they are doing right now in Vuhledar and to the west of Donetsk city is basically trying to disperse the attention of Ukrainians in Luhansk region. And most likely the bare minimum goal of this Russian operation will be to completely stop the counteroffensive of Ukrainians, and in the best case scenario, Russians will even be able to change the course of war. And well, I also personally do not think this will happen either, but at least this is a more realistic scenario. In addition to that, there are other signs that Russians are preparing for the next round of the offensive, and this includes the increased production of the military equipment inside the country, and also all these trade agreements with countries such as Iran and North Korea. And also, if you're following the Russian social medias, you can see that the Russian military bloggers, they also in some way started preparing their subscribers for the potential next offensive by Russia. Next, we also have the statement by the Defense Intelligence of the United Kingdom, which says that Russians will increase their pressure in Donetsk region, in cities such as Vuhledar and Pavlivka, in order to switch the attention of Ukrainians away from Bakhmut and the entire Luhansk region, which pretty much also confirms the conclusions made by the Institute for the Study of War. But despite all these preparations, according to President Zelensky, Russia will most likely still not be able to revenge successfully. And among the main reasons for this, it is because there are so many Western allies behind Ukrainians' back who not just provide the intelligence data, but also their military equipment and training. And if you remember from one of my previous videos, I was already talking about this dilemma that Russian government is facing right now. On the one hand, Russia can attack right now before Ukraine receives all these Western weapons, but Russia itself is not that much yet prepared. And on the other hand, if Russia decides to wait and be more prepared for this offensive, this is when Ukraine will already receive all the Western military vehicles, and most likely Russia does not stand a chance. And to make things worse, in the best traditions for the Russian authorities, the highest commandment most likely receives the reports from its subordinates that no worries, our army is ready to invade. Which, as you already know, has been a critical mistake of Russia all the way since the beginning of this war. And anyways, whenever Ukraine will most likely repel this Russian attack and weaken the Russian army and their morale even further, this is when the Ukrainian counteroffensive will follow. Because it's not a secret that you should attack when your enemy is at its lowest point. And according to the Chief of Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, Kirill Budanov, when Russia is inevitably defeated in Luhansk and Donetsk, this is when Ukraine will start liberating Crimean Peninsula, because according to him, it all started back in 2014 in Crimea, and logically, it all should end there. The first quarter of the year promises us to be full of good news from Ukraine, and I cannot wait to report them for you. And once again, if you don't want to miss any of this as soon as it starts happening, just please subscribe to my channel, it only takes one click. And if you want to support my work financially, please consider becoming my channel member, use the PayPal link, or become my Patreon, where there's still 1 week of free access. All the other useful links can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.